November 12, 1944. A frozen Norwegian fjord 200 miles inside the Arctic Circle. On the foredeck of the battleship Tirpitz, German gun crews watch 30 Lancaster bombers approaching from the south through clear autumn skies. They are not afraid. They have been here before. Bombers have come for this ship more times than anyone aboard can count. Carrier aircraft have struck her deck. Midget submarines have blown charges beneath her keel. None of them have sunk her. Crews have watched bombs shatter against her armoured deck and do nothing. They have seen smokescreens swallow entire formations before they could drop. They have seen raids turn back with empty racks. In their experience, the Tirpitz cannot be killed. 11 minutes after the first bomb falls, the Tirpitz rolls over and buries her superstructure in the seabed. Around 1,000 of her crew are dead. The men who survived had no framework to explain what had happened. Neither did the German naval staff in Berlin, who spent the following weeks producing an assessment so bewildered, it reads less like a military report and more like a confession. The effect of the weapon, they wrote, was beyond human imagination and unknown at the time of planning and building the ship. They were not talking about a bigger bomb, they were describing a weapon that had changed what a bomb was for. And the story of how that weapon came to exist, and why it took 3 years of failure before anyone would let the man who designed it prove he was right, is the story this investigation turns on. To understand what fell from those Lancasters that morning, we have to go back, not to November 1944, not even to the day the Tirpitz sailed to Norway. We have to go back to a problem that had haunted every air force on Earth since the invention of the aeroplane. Conventional bombs could not defeat modern battleship armor. The casing was too thin. The explosive charge was too small. The impact velocity was too low. Every bomb in the Allied arsenal had been designed to detonate on the surface. Against 300 millimeters of hardened steel that was like throwing stones at a cathedral wall, the Tirpitz was the second and last of Germany's Bismarck-class battleships, launched in April 1939. She was the heaviest battleship ever built by a European navy, over 52,000 tons at full load. Her main belt armor was 320 millimeters of Krupp-cemented steel. Her turret faces were 360. Her armored deck was engineered to shatter conventional bombs on impact. She carried 8 15-inch guns, a dozen secondary guns, and scores of anti-aircraft weapons. To attack her at anchor, you first had to get past fighter patrols, then a curtain of shore batteries and flak ships, then a double ring of torpedo nets, and finally a smoke screen system that could blank out an entire fjord in 8 minutes. The chemicals they pumped into the air were so corrosive, they stunted tree growth around the anchorage for over a decade. She was, on paper, unkillable from the sky. And in practice, for 3 years, she proved it. But here is the thing about the Tirpitz that made Churchill lose sleep. She almost never had to fight. In January 1942, Hitler sent her to Norway, and her mission from that moment was not to engage the Royal Navy. Her mission was to exist. As long as the Tirpitz sat in a Norwegian fjord, the British had to keep capital ships, carriers and destroyers in home waters to guard against a breakout, ships they desperately needed in the Mediterranean and the Pacific. Churchill understood what that meant. He directed on January 25, 1942, that the destruction or even crippling of this ship is the greatest event at sea at the present time, and that no other target is comparable to it. He called her the Beast. In July 1942, she proved how right he was without firing a shot. Convoy PQ-17 was sailing for the Soviet Union when the Admiralty received intelligence that the Tirpitz might be putting to sea. First Sea Lord Dudley Pound ordered the convoy to scatter. The Tirpitz barely moved. She never made contact. But the merchant ships, now sailing alone and defenseless, were picked off one by one. 23 of 34 went down. Churchill called it one of the most melancholy naval episodes in the whole of the war. The Tirpitz had won her greatest victory from anchor with her guns cold. So the British tried to kill her, and for 3 years, everything they tried failed. RAF Bomber Command sent night raids. The bombs missed or bounced off her armoured deck like gravel. In October 1942, they sent Chariot human torpedoes towed beneath a Norwegian fishing boat toward Trondheim's fjord. A storm tore both craft loose and the mission was scrubbed. In September 1943, They sent the most daring thing of all, Operation Source. 6 midget submarines, ex-craft, towed across the North Sea to break into the anchorage at Fjord. Of the 6 boats that set out, only 2 reached the target. Lieutenant Donald Cameron in X6 slipped through the anti-submarine boom behind a German supply vessel, dropped both sets of explosive charges beneath the Tirpitz, and scuttled his craft. Lieutenant Basil Place in X7 fought through the torpedo nets, laid his charges, and was captured when his boat became entangled. The charges detonated, lifting the battleship bodily in the water and throwing one of her main turrets clean off its bearings. Both men received the Victoria Cross. The Tirpitz was crippled for 6 months, but she did not sink. In April 1944, the fleet air arm threw everything it had. Operation Tungsten, roughly 40 Barracuda dive bombers in 2 waves, scoring around 15 hits. 122 of her crew were killed. Her superstructure was wrecked, and not a single bomb penetrated the main armoured deck. The Tirpitz was still there, still floating, still tying down the home fleet. Every conventional weapon in the Allied arsenal had been used against her, and the ship had absorbed them all. Hold on to that, because what happened next is the part that makes the German naval report make sense. There was a man who had been saying for 3 years that they were all going about it wrong. His name was Barnes Wallis. He was 57 years old. He had no military rank. He was a civilian aircraft designer at Vickers, the man who had built the geodetic airframe of the Wellington bomber, a structure so resilient that Wellingtons came home with entire sections of fuselage, shot away and still flying. Wallis understood, at a level most ordnance engineers did not, how force travels through materials. In 1941, he had written a paper that the Air Ministry largely ignored. His argument was that a heavy bomb, dropped from great height, did not need to hit a target directly. If it buried itself deep in the ground or water beside the target, the detonation would send a shockwave through the earth or the seabed, and that shockwave would do more structural damage than any surface explosion ever could. The ground, he said, transmits energy far more efficiently than air. Hit the ground next to something, and you can destroy it from underneath. He called it earthquake bombing. The result was the Tallboy, 12,000 pounds of high-tensile steel packed with over 5,000 pounds of Torpex, an explosive roughly 50% more powerful than TNT. Offset fins spun it in freefall. Its shape was so clean it approached the speed of sound on the way down, burying itself deep before detonating. It was not designed to punch through armour. It was designed to make armour irrelevant. In September 1944, Lancasters of 6, 1, 7 and 9 squadrons carried Tallboys to Norway for the first time. Operation Paravane. They flew from a Soviet airfield at Jagodnik because Fjord was beyond range of Scotland. A single Tallboy struck the bow. It ripped open the forward section and flooded hundreds of tons of seawater into the ship. The Tirpitz could barely make 10 knots. She was finished as a seagoing warship. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz faced a decision that would seal the ship's fate. He could not repair her. The only Atlantic dry dock large enough, the Normandy dock at St. Nazaire, had been destroyed by British commandos in 1942. So Dönitz ordered the Tirpitz moved south to Hakoia Island near Tromsø to serve as a static gun battery. The crew began building a sandbank beneath her hull to prevent capsizing. The water turned out to be deeper than planned. By November, the sandbank was barely half finished. A German inquiry after the sinking confirmed the depth of the berth did not conform to the Commander-in-Chief's directions. The move to Tromsø brought the Tirpitz within range of modified Lancasters flying from RAF Lancasters in northern Scotland. Wing Commander Willie Tait, commanding 617 Squadron, the Dambusters, had already led the Paravane attack. He would lead the one that finished it. On the morning of November 12, roughly 30 Lancasters took off before dawn. Each carried a single Tallboy. They crossed the Norwegian coast at low altitude, climbed over the mountains, and turned north. The round trip from Scotland to Tromsø and back was over 2,000 miles, flown without fighter escort. Tait spotted the Tirpitz from about 20 miles away, and later described her lying squat and black among her torpedo nets, like a spider in her web. The smoke screen did not appear. The generators that had protected her at Fjord had not been reinstalled. The fighters from Bardufoss never arrived. Nobody had told the fighter wing that the Tirpitz had even moved. The ship opened fire with her main battery, but the Lancasters held their run. Tait dropped first. At least 2 Tallboys struck the ship directly. Several near misses exploded in the water alongside, shattering the half-built sandbank and tearing open the port side below the waterline. The ship listed fast. At roughly 9:50 in the morning, the magazine beneath turret Caesar detonated, hurling the turret roof over 80 feet into the air. 2 minutes later, the Tirpitz rolled onto her beam ends and went under. Captain Robert Webber had held command for 8 days. He died in the sinking along with almost all his officers. Rescuers spent 2 days cutting through the upturned hull and pulled 87 men from inside. Between 940 and 1200 of her crew were beyond rescue. The recriminations were savage. Major Heinrich Erler, who commanded the fighter wing at Bardufoss, was court-martialed for failing to scramble his aircraft in time. His men believed he was a scapegoat for a communication breakdown between the Navy and the Air Force that nobody wanted to own. Erler was convicted, briefly imprisoned, released, and transferred to fly jet fighters. He was killed in action in April 1945. The German Navy's own investigation laid it out with painful clarity. The capsizing was caused by the combination of structural damage to the port side, the unfinished sandbank beneath the hull, and the collapse of watertight integrity when the crew evacuated the lower compartments. There was no single cause, but every cause traced back to the same weapon. A weapon no warship had been built to survive, because no warship had ever been designed with the assumption that the seabed beneath it could be turned into an explosive force. Wallis had understood something that had eluded every naval architect who ever drew a hull. Armour faces outward, armour faces upward. It is built to stop shells and bombs coming from the direction the enemy is expected to attack. Nobody had asked what happens when the attack comes from below, through the water and the ground, from a bomb that does not need to touch the ship at all. The German report called it beyond human imagination. What they meant was that it was beyond their engineering assumptions. 320 millimeters of the best steel in Europe had been rendered meaningless by a man who simply refused to play by the rules the steel was built to enforce. Willie Tait flew 101 operations during the war. He received the Distinguished Service Order and 3 bars, the Distinguished Flying Cross and Bar, 6 gallantry awards in all. He was recommended for the Victoria Cross and received a further DSO instead. Donald Cameron and Basil Place, who crippled the Tirpitz in their midget submarines a full year before the Tallboys finished the job, both survived captivity. Wallis lived to the age of 92 and never stopped designing. The men who flew those Lancasters over Tromsø were not names anyone would have recognized the day before. They were young men from ordinary towns who climbed into stripped-down bombers, carrying a weapon that a civilian engineer had imagined at a desk 3 years earlier, when nobody believed him. Not one of them designed the bomb. Not one of them made the decision to move the ship to shallow water. Not one of them crippled her in a midget submarine the year before. Each was a single link in a chain that stretched back through years of failure to a single conceptual breakthrough that changed naval warfare permanently. You do not have to be stronger than the thing in front of you. You have to understand what it is standing on, and then you take that away. Every like on this video keeps stories like this visible to the audience that cares about getting the history right. Subscribe if you want the next chapter. The men who made these decisions and flew these missions earned more than a footnote, and there are many more of their stories still waiting to be told properly.